Oh, how silly. Oh, oh, look, we've done it again. Normally by now, one of us would have decided which way to...
Sorry!
There's an extremely subtle but effective art to pedestrianism, and a lot of it slips by our conscious thought when we just go about our daily lives. However, there are certainly many levels to the metagame of walking, particularly in avoiding other people's paths. I'm sure everybody's played chicken at some point. You know, you're walking directly towards another person until they finally agree on a side to pass. Sometimes you bump into them on accident, or there's a bit of like jumping to the side, and you just think to yourself, wow, they suck at walking, you know, but you did the same exact thing. So that's why I'm going to address the metagame to understand why that happens, some factors that kind of play into that, and how to fix it. So here's a couple of topics. We're going to talk about walking on the correct side, and how and why the subconscious works during this sort of passing period, what to do when there's groups of people walking, and what to do in adverse circumstances, so in weird terrains or just other situations that you might encounter. So hopefully with some of this knowledge, you'll be able to optimize your pedestrian experience. For the sake of my own time, I'll say right now that I consider non-walking pedestrianism to be the same thing as walking, effectively in the process. So it's at a much faster pace and there's less opportunity for error, especially if you're biking, skateboarding, skating, you're on a scooter, or whatever else have you. You should essentially operate under the same understandings and rules on sidewalks as people walking or running, with the exception that walkers should yield or move off the sidewalk should it be dangerous for the non-walker to do so in times of space contention. So let's start a hypothetical. If I were to present you with a hallway with nobody in it, no turns, just a straight hallway with double doors right in the middle. They're identical, but you need to go through one door to pass. I'll let you think for just a second. Pause if it's really that hard for you. Right. So the vast majority of people would select the right door, especially in America. And, well, why? Because the unspoken laws of pedestrianism, they rule your life. People tend to walk on the right side of sidewalks even when nobody's around. They tend to open the right door. They tend to go through the right door frame. And they go up stairwells on the right side because we drive on the right side of the road. And it's not really applicable if you're from EU, the whole driving on the right side of the road, or other countries that drive on the left, I suppose. But from what I've seen and read online and discussions I've seen, you don't really follow any sort of pedestrian system. You sort of just wander all over the sidewalk like anarchist scum. So I'm not talking about you. You can leave. But furthermore, the custom is to pass people on the left when you're going faster than them, or to head off to the right if you're slower. It's just sort of societally ingrained into our brains. That's how you operate on highways. You know, passing lane is on the left. And it's not a bad thing to be consistent, right? The problem arises when somebody breaks the rules, as I mentioned in the stair video. And often one's going to become rather uncomfortable or frustrated when someone does. But you may not realize what they did wrong. So here's some frustrating things. Walking in the middle of a sidewalk up to and when passing someone. And I'm not saying, you know, walking in the middle isn't fine, but leaving time to adjust before passing to be courteous is very nice. It can be possibly very annoying to people trying to pass you from behind if you walk in the middle and you're pretty slow. Walking on the left side, or if you're facing the person your right, and not using your eyes to project your direction. So this last one's the subtle part. This is what has to do with your subconscious. So it's really important, and like I said, it's especially subtle. It's thought that our eyes can recognize images spotted for as little as 13 milliseconds. You know, about the time it takes your eye to glance during what they call saccadic movements. So these are where your eyes kind of glance and focus in. They move back and forth really quickly. This can happen up to 100 times per second when there's a lot of stimulus, even more if there's adrenaline flowing in your body. So times like when you're running, for example, any sort of cardio activity, you can get a little adrenaline, a little blood flowing. This happens more, so you're more perceptive. And so one thing our monkey brains focus on when there's somebody looking in the direction they intend to travel when they're moving towards us, we focus on that subconsciously. So this is social information that we gather, and it's intensely fast. It's somewhat involuntary, you may not notice that it's happening, but you'll glance at somebody's eyes to see which way they're going. You'll look at their feet, the direction they pivot. And it's done to analyze people and animals and things around us to make sure we're safe and that they're not coming directly towards us. In that sense, it's a rather basic reflex, and it allows one to react to quick movements and visualize when something's focused on us, where they're focused and where they're going. But when we're walking, we actually glance towards where we intend to go in order to make sure it's the same, that nothing's changed. And we do this to reassure our weak sense of object permanence because we're cringe. We don't know that things exist when we're not looking at them. This actually also serves to let others know where we're going and to micro-adjust their path as needed. So a few things can actually really subvert this sort of social tool, and it causes collisions when they do. So they actually become more present in our contemporary society than they used to be, say 200 years ago, because of all the distractions in our lives. Everything's constantly going on. So this happens when you're not looking where you're going. So being on your phone, looking at advertisements, signs, whatever. Moving erratically for whatever reason can sort of mess with this information by jumping off to the side, doing something consciously, that kind of subverts how this goes on a subconscious level, and generally just being too self-aware and adjusting to every stimulus you see rather than letting your monkey, your lizard brain kind of do it for you. So to put it really simply and honestly, paying active attention or checking in frequently is enough to prevent this. Just being conscious of the things you see, but not trying to be so conscious that you interrupt the natural flow. I realize it's a really weird thing to conceptualize, to be told, don't think too hard. I hate when that happens, but that's the honest solution. That's what you should do. So I've sort of explained, why we get upset at other people who are walking, what they may be doing wrong, and how to fix a couple of mistakes. But let's get into variants, things that can upset this flow. Other than the people involved, just the environment. So when there's more than one person facing you on a sidewalk, the most courteous thing to do is adjust relative to group size. So for example, one person should adjust much more than two groups of two equally, two more than three, and groups actually become quite problematic when they take too much ownership over the sidewalk. That's when it becomes a problem. So they should adjust pretty evenly, if only slightly, for a single person. In situations where you're walking in groups of even numbers, such as 4, 6, 8 people, then it's way more courteous to walk in pairs than a 4x1 horizontally across the sidewalk. I mean, everybody's run into that. Everyone I know has complained at some point or another that people walking in a hallway in a 4x1 that you can't pass, that you just have to walk behind because when you're walking in a group, you walk slower. And it's virtually impassable. You can't do much about it, especially on a tight sidewalk or highway. So it's unnecessary anyways, as the two ends actually get left out of the conversation more often than not, so they might as well have their own conversation, just split and be a pair. To me, that just seems like the solution that's best for everyone. All right, but enough of that tangent. Let's get into some environmental conditions. So there's blockages and walls that kind of constrict your movement, right? Blockages, things you have to go around. Usually sidewalks will curve around them, but say there's something in a hallway, right? Or walls off to the side so you can't get out of the way. In which case, obviously, it's the person who's not faced with the obstruction's job to adjust for you. In the case of automobiles and traffic, in my opinion, you can jaywalk if you want. I don't really see the harm in it as long as you're conscious, you know what you're doing, and you do it in a reasonable and safe manner. If there's no cars around, for example, don't walk into a car's path. It's just like jumping in front of somebody who's running. It's just wrong. It's terrible. Don't be that person. Just don't impede traffic. Don't be rude. Be courteous. Look where you're going to communicate. This is something I see a lot of people fail to do. Even pointing where you're going at a crosswalk so that the car is cognizant of what your plan is. It's just so courteous. You don't have to just jump in front of them and have the chance of being hit. So don't swing into the road with no warning. Again, just be courteous. In the cases of turns, you should follow the traffic order format. It's, again, something that's rather intuitive, but a lot of people seem to fail to do for whatever reason. And all you have to do is be on the right when you're turning right, be on the left, which would be the middle, not like the actual left of a hallway or sidewalk, when you're turning left, such that there's ample room. Don't turn left from the very left side of the hallway because there'll be someone on the right that you bump into almost every time. It's not that hard to understand, and it's really simple to fix. Just be aware of not only your surroundings, where you are in the hallway, but where people could be, especially if you can't see them. So in this recording, I've actually sort of been leaning towards a rant already because I get really heated about this, but I'll get into an actual rant real quick. I'll start with doors. So if you're entering a hallway, don't swing the door wide open and fast. Make it slowly noticeable, especially in tight hallways, and leave some space if you're walking not to get hit by the door. And this plays back into being aware of your general environment, because especially if it's a time where people are going to be moving in and out of doors a lot, like a passing period in a school or lunch hour in an office, you can be aware that most likely doors might open around you, so you might want to be careful. And then for doorways to staircases and double doors, where the only way through is by opening one of two doors, please open the door on the right. Like, don't be the person that opens the door on the left, walks into somebody, doesn't apologize, and then goes on about their day. You're a terrible person. And especially don't be that person that opens the right door, but then only opens it a crack so that you have to walk in front of the other door in order to slide by, so the other person has to wait anyways, and then you act like you're doing the wrong thing, but you weren't, you were just being rude. As far as a general rule or rules of thumb for walking, just don't impede traffic, whether that's automobile or foot. Don't be too slow or too spacious. That's the way to do that. Don't be dangerous by going too quickly or moving, laterally too erratically, but also be mindful and courteous of the people and things around you. It's honestly not that hard. I understand a lot of this is sort of implicit, which is partially the reason I'd like to explicitly address a lot of it, but it's still intuitive nonetheless. You can use your best judgment a lot of the time. And if an accident happens, apologize. Don't be that person that bumps into somebody and then gives them a weird look. That's just, you're crazy. So winding down, I just say a lot of this stuff because there are actually people out here who refuse to budge in like the most spacious hallway, and then they act surprised if a collision happens, just totally at their fault. Sometimes I drift off. I dream of not moving for them and just letting them get a hard shoulder because that's what they're vying for anyways. It's like they have absolutely no conscious idea of the space they occupy in the hallway. And, it's like those people who they decide that when they walk, they should swing their arms like at least 6 inches away from their torso and 2 feet forward and back. Like, you realize how unnatural that is. That doesn't just happen in your gait. Your muscles don't just move that way that much. And so you're just like adding extra momentum to your arms in order to take up space and to be annoying. And you may not do it consciously, but that's what you're doing. Just stop. So that's sort of my take on walking. And whether you realized it or not before now, I'm sorry. But you've been initiated into the pedestrian meta. You'll be thinking about the way you walk pretty much until the end of time. And I'm somewhat sorry for forcing it on you, but again, you kind of chose to watch this until the end. You knew what you were getting into, I would hope. So you're never not going to be able to think about that. And it's a dilemma, right? Because you either become aware and cause problems because of it, because you're adjusting consciously, or you just forever wallow in your poor walking technique unknowingly. It's like a catch-22. But the best advice I can offer you is just don't overthink it. I know it's terrible advice, but that's the best I got. Be aware of what you hopefully used to do, and be as happy as you can knowing why people are wrong, which sometimes can suck. Once again, this is me saying I'm sorry, but, ignorance is bliss and all that. I hope you enjoyed or, well, at least learned something. Take care.